Let's talk about chapter 3 and 4 in our book, It Starts with Food. If you're following along in the book, chapter 3 is on page 24. As always, I will share, reading through these paragraphs and some of my own commentary because I really want us to understand the power of food. It isn't just hitting your macros. It's every single thing you put in your mouth, whether it's a drink or a food, is going to impact your body in some way. And I want you to feel good, right? If putting on muscle or losing body fat is your goal, each one of these things is going to make us feel a certain way. So I love that she starts this by explaining through this book, and the challenge that they do at the end is choosing foods by following their 4 good food standards. We're pretty picky about all this. All the foods we recommend have to satisfy 4 criteria. So those 4 criteria I love and also talk a lot about. So I was excited to see that this is kind of how this book focused on some of the same things. For one, the food we eat has to promote a healthy psychological response. Number 2, promote a healthy hormonal response. 3, support a healthy gut. 4, support immune function and minimize inflammation. Because all of these things, if we don't have these things in order, we feel like crap. I've experienced most of these actually, and I'm still going through inflammation and my own healthy gut issues now, and that's why I'm swapping a lot of my foods. And so I wanted to read this book again myself and thought I'm going to share it with everybody. So let's first, in chapter 3, it's literally 2 pages long, talks a little bit about what is food, right? I don't think we fully understand how food works and what it does to the body, and then I'm hoping that you guys can then make whatever food choices you want because you know how that food's gonna, individually impact you. So food is composed of a multitude of complex molecules. Some provide energy, some provide structural components, and some interact with various receptors and transmit signals to our bodies. And then some are relatively inert. So we can say things like, I eat whole grains for fiber, or I drink milk for calcium. The reality is all the whole unprocessed food is a rich, complex blend of nutrients. And we put those in 2 different groups. So we have micronutrients and macronutrients. And we talk about macros or macronutrients often, but we can tend to overlook micronutrients, but those are actually so important. So micronutrient is defined as an essential compound needed only in relatively small amounts. A micronutrient's purpose is not to generate energy, but to serve a wide variety of important biological functions, including protection against free radicals, enhancing immune response, and repairing DNA. There are hundreds of different micronutrients. Some you've heard of, like vitamin C, or minerals like calcium, phytonutrients like beta-carotene. And selecting foods with the right amounts and a wide variety of micronutrients is critical for our long-term health. That's all the vitamins, right? There's a million vitamin brands and different types. Then really you only need to take those if you're not getting them through food or you still have a little bit of a deficiency. But a macronutrient is defined as a group of chemical compounds consumed in a large amount and necessary for normal growth, metabolism, and other bodily functions. They supply energy, and in some cases are structural components, and those are carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. So those are our macros because they're large, right? We eat them, they're the big pieces of food, right? Where micronutrients are more at the cellular level. So very, very quick overview. Carbs include several types of sugar, multiple types of starches, and dietary fiber. All carbs, whether they come from a carrot, brown rice, or a Pop-Tart, break down into simple sugars in the body. We talked a lot about this in our last book, which was Glucose Revolution. Complex carbohydrates are simply a bunch of sugars linked together, and those chains of sugars are broken into their individual links upon digestion. Simple carbs, specifically glucose, are a universal energy source that is easily used by most cells in the body, and glucose is fuel for intense activity and fuel for your brain cells. Proteins are made up of long chains of amino acids, which are the building blocks for all sorts of biological structures. The amino acids and proteins are necessary for building, maintaining, and repairing muscles, connective tissue like tendons and ligaments, skin, hair, and even your bones and teeth. And in addition, most enzymes and many hormones in the body are actually proteins. This is why we say protein's not just meant to repair muscle. I get a lot of clients, and honestly, I used to think this way too, that if I was sick or injured, or if I wasn't strength training and lifting weights, on my rest days or periods where I didn't need to hit my protein goal. But it's responsible for so many more things. It repairs all tissues in the body. It's very, very important. Well, for many, many reasons we'll talk more about later, but it controls a lot of enzymes and hormones also. So fats are either in free form, free fatty acids, or built into complexes. Fatty acids belong to one of 3 types of families: saturated, monosaturated or polyunsaturated. Fats allow you to absorb fat-soluble vitamins and essential nutrients from food. They help to transport proper nutrients across cell membranes, and they're critical for maintaining proper immune function. Dietary fibers are also the building blocks for brain tissue, nerve fibers, reproductive and stress hormones, immune messengers, and cellular membranes. Finally, fat is also an excellent slow-burning energy source, perfect for supporting lower intensity activity. Also, when I first started my own journey, if you can say that word, I started adjusting the food I was eating. Prior to that, I would look at a food label, and the only thing I knew how to read on that was fat grams, because I didn't understand what the rest was, and I didn't care about protein. And I just would look for whatever brand had the lowest amount of fat, because I thought the more fat grams made me fat. I just thought that's how it's translated, until I actually figured out how this works and got a better understanding. So if any of you had that little knowledge like me, that's not how it works. That's literally not how it works. We have to have a minimum of 40 grams of fat a day, minimum, because it does so many things. Building blocks for brain tissue. There's a lot that happens, and so it's really important. If your hormones are off, sex drive is down, feeling lethargic or tired, a lot of times we don't have enough fat in our food, healthy fat. And then the energy contained within each type of macronutrient is measured in calories. So carbs and protein each contain 4 calories per gram. So for 1 gram of a carb, it's 4 calories. For 1 gram of protein, it's 4 calories. But 1 gram of fat is 9 calories. So you see that when you eat fat grams, it adds up a heck of a lot faster. If only, let's see. Diet books and experts have long attributed weight problems to simply eating too many calories and specifically too much fat. But after all, fat is more than twice as calorie dense as protein or carbs, if it only were that easy. Simply reducing calories or fat isn't the answer. The foods you exert a powerful psychological influence, stronger than any act of willpower. Food choices, they influence your hormones. The foods we eat silently directing your metabolism. They affect your digestive tract, your body's first line of defense, and they impact your immune system and risk for any number of diseases and conditions. So the foods that we eat have a really powerful part of our body. So I love it because the next couple chapters, we're going to talk about your brain on food, why that's important, healthy hormones, the gut of the matter, so healthy gut, and then inflammation, because that's such oh my gosh, inflammation is terrible. We're about to introduce our 4 good food standards. They're in this order for a reason, because we think this is generally how things start going wrong. First, you overconsume nutrient-poor foods because of their psychological effect on you, right? We eat sugary, I don't want to say healthy versus non-healthy. We say more nutrient-dense or less nutrient-dense, because your Oreos, there's no nutritional value to it, but it makes you feel good and you like it, right? That's low nutrient-dense. But we overconsume that mostly because the psychological effect has on us. And then overconsumption of that then leads to hormonal, gut, and immune system disruption and all the symptoms, conditions, and diseases that follow. So these chapters will lay the groundwork for the discussion on food and make it much easier for you to understand why we'll be asking you to remove certain foods from your plate. So we're going to take out, at the end of this, we're going to take out a few of these food groups and see how you feel, and then introduce them back in with your own individual needs and see how you respond. So let's jump in. So we want to talk about the brain on food and why we have cravings, why we can't let go of certain foods, why we feel compelled to eat them, why we have addictions. Because a lot of people, clients, myself, used to say, I have to have this sugar, or I have to have 7 snacks a day. I can't just have 1 cookie. I have to have 8 cookies. I'm not hungry, but I have to have the piece of sugar, right? I start thinking about a cookie, and then the next thing I know, I'm in the store buying one, even though I don't want it, and I'm not hungry. All of that is mental. So you're not actually hungry. So before anything, we've got to really understand how that works. So they say, are you surprised that we're leading off with the psychology and not calories, energy, or metabolism? Stay with us, because we suspect this section is going to resonate with you. We think foods are good for your body. You should also not mess with your mind, right? We want a healthy relationship with food. My goal too as a coach is I want you to be able to be in control. So where you say, you know what? I don't need that cookie. I'm choosing ahead of time to eat something, not that pull and that addiction of I have to have it, and I'm thinking about it, and then I can taste it, and now my mouth is salivating, and I've got to go for it. We want a healthy mindset to where you actually choose and are in control of how much you eat. How many times have you tried a new plan, bought new foods, and stuck to the new menu for a few weeks only to fall right back into your old habits? And then sometimes, right, we gain that body fat back. Every time you've tried to diet, we suspect, right? We want to know why your previous efforts have failed. Dieting does not work, and we know this. That's why it's called diet. We keep going back to it, right? We want to change our mindset and change how we view things. Calorie restrictive plans have been found to help folks lose weight, but only in the short term. We have to change their habits, right? So let's read through some of this. In addition, creating healthy dietary habits isn't just about restricting or eliminating certain foods. It's not just about cutting stuff out. You already know that fast food, junk food, and sweets aren't very nutrient dense or good for you. You know you shouldn't eat them if you want to lose weight, right? Body fat, if you want to get off your medication or to be healthier. But yet we continue to eat them. You know, we all come up with our goals, but then we still do those things. Like, why can't we just change the habit? One day say, I'm going to do this, and then do it forever. I only know very, very, very few people that can do that, and that's not me. In addition, you struggle with food cravings, bad habits, compulsions, and addictions. You know that you shouldn't, but you feel compelled to eat those foods. Sometimes you don't even want them, but you eat them anyways, and you have a hard time stopping. All of this can make us feel guilty and stressed and more likely to comfort yourself with even more unhealthy food. So we're here to tell you it's not your fault. So let's explain how the brain works. You're not lacking willpower, you're not lazy, and it's not your fault that you can't stop eating these foods. Now, she goes on to explain that you're responsible for your choices. Don't get me wrong, right? We always take responsible for where our body shape is and what we're putting in our mouth, but we got to understand why we do that. You have to understand that it's these unhealthy foods have an unfair advantage because they're designed to mess with your brain. They are built to make you crave them, and they make it hard for you to give them up. And so they want to explain to us why we do that. Food cravings can be defined as an intense desire to consume a particular food or type of food that's difficult to resist. Cravings aren't merely about your behavior related to the food in question. They're about your emotional motivation and the conditioning habit that is created with repeated satisfaction. You don't even have to be hungry to experience cravings. In fact, they're more closely related to moods like anger, sadness, or frustration than to hunger. In addition, your capacity to visualize the food and imagine its taste are strongly correlated with craving strength. So the more you fantasize about indulging, the less likely you are to resist. Specific food cravings can turn into poor eating habits in just a few days, leaving us to be stuck in a cycle of relentless urges, short-term satisfaction, and long-term guilt, shame, anxiety, and weight gain. So to effectively change our relationship with food and maintain new healthy habits forever, we need to understand that what is behind our cravings, habits, and patterns, and it all starts with biology and nature. So then it kind of goes over the next couple chapters explaining that, like, back in the ancient days, we're talking like centuries ago, our bodies were only meant to understand signals of foods that are pleasure and reward because they gave us like vitamin-rich, nutrient-dense food. And we knew how to recognize those, and our body craves those type of food, right? And now it's all, oh my gosh, it's all over the place because over the last 50 years, the makeup of our food has dramatically changed. Our grocery stores and health food markets are packed with shelves of processed, refined food-like products which no longer look anything like the plant or animal from which they were derived. The fact that our brains respond strongly to specific flavors, sweet, fatty, or salty, are armed with this knowledge. The food companies, to modify our whole foods. They sucked out the water, the fiber, and the nutrients and replaced them with ingredients like corn syrup, MSG, seed oils, and artificial sweeteners, colors, and flavors. With the specific intention of inducing cravings, overconsumption, and bigger profits for food manufacturers. Because these foods light up our pleasure and reward centers in the brain for a different reason than what nature intended. Not because they provide vital nutrition, but because they're scientifically designed to stimulate our taste buds. The effect is a total disconnection between pleasurable, rewarding tastes, which is like the basic sweet, fatty, and salt, and the nutrition that always accompanies them in nature, right? Whole foods, how it's meant to be eaten. In nature, sweet tastes usually come from a seasonal raw fruit rich in vitamin, minerals, and phytonutrients. Today, sweet flavors come in artificial sweeteners, refined sugars, and high fructose corn syrup. In nature, fatty tastes usually came from meats, especially nutrient-packed organ meats, and in modern times, fats came from deep fryer or a tub of spread, right? So instead of getting those from meats, we're now getting them from a tub of spread. And modern technology has stripped the nutrition from these foods, replacing it with empty calories and synthetic chemicals that fool our bodies into giving us the same powerful biological signals to keep eating. This means we're eating more calories, but with less nutrition, so you're going to feel crappier. Persistent biological signals lead us to overeat sweet, fatty, salty foods while keeping us malnourished. And if you understand like shelf life of products, a lot of times they remove the fiber from foods because the shelf life is longer. Well, the fiber is the best part of why we eat something. So now you're just left with sugar and the fiber is missing. And so we've got to really, really be aware of what it is that we're actually eating. If these foods taste so good that I can't stop eating them, maybe I should just stop eating foods that taste good. Well, that sounds miserable to us, and flavor restriction should probably be the last of an unsuccessful long-term as caloric restriction, right? We don't want to ever say no to all of those things. Thankfully, the strategy is wholly unnecessary. The problem isn't that the foods are delicious. That's not the problem. The problem is that these foods are supernormally stimulating in the absence of nutrition and satiety. So there are the essence of empty calories, food with no breaks. So she gives a pretty good example between prime rib and Oreos. The idea of food breaks can be explained by satiety and satiation. They sound the same, but biologically speaking, they're two separate and distinct concepts. So satiety occurs in your digestive tract, specifically in your intestines. When you've digested and absorbed enough calories and nutrients to satisfy your body's needs, hormones signal to your brain that I'm well nourished and decrease the desire for more food. It can't be fooled or faked. It's dependent on the actual nutrition in your food. But since digestion is slow, these signals may take several hours to be transmitted, which means they can't do a very good job all by themselves to keep you from overeating. That's where satiation comes in. So satiation is regulated in the brain and provides more timely motivation to stop eating. It's based on the smell, taste, and texture of the food, the perception of fullness. You know how you just have to ask yourself, like, am I full? Yeah. And then we stop. Or if we're like, crap, I want more of that cookie, we continue to eat. But we can kind of tell when we're full. And even your knowledge of how many calories are in a meal. So as you eat, you perceive various sensations. This is delicious. I shouldn't eat the whole bag, or I'm getting pretty full. All of which send your brain status updates to help you determine whether you still want more. But unlike satiety, satiation is an estimate dependent on your perceptions, not an absolute measurement. So you get two different things, right? Say satiety is your body saying, hey, I'm full, and it sends you the hormone signal, we're done. We've gotten enough to fuel our energy for what we need. And then satiation is more of like, yeah, my own perception of it. So ideally, the brain would signal us to stop eating when our bodies have sensed that we're digested and absorbed enough nutrition to support our health. Because your body just wants the nutrients from it. That's what it cares about. Your body runs off knowing I'm getting the nutrients out of these foods. And in this case, satiation and satiety would be one and the same. Let's use the example of prime rib dinner. Okay, so prime rib. It contains a complete protein, the most satiating of all the macronutrients, very, very filling, and naturally occurring fat, which makes protein even more satiating. So it's gonna make you feel full fast. As you eat your prime rib, you'll find yourself wanting prime rib less and less with every bite. I feel this. Sometimes that's how I feel with chicken too. The first bite was amazing, the second fantastic, but by the 10th bite, the texture, smell, and flavor are less appealing. By the 20th bite, you've had enough and no longer desire the flavor or texture of the meat, so down goes your fork. You're done. This is satiation. Prime rib also takes longer to eat than processed food, as you actually have to chew a lot and swallow, which gives your brain a chance to catch up with your stomach. And as you eat and start to digest the meat, your body recognizes that the dense nutrition in that prime rib is adequate for your energy and caloric needs. This sends a we're getting nourishment signal to your brain while you're still working on your plate, which also reduces your want for more food. It's actually a pretty cool system. This is satiety. Now, this scenario plays out differently for foods lacking the satiation factors of adequate nutrition, complete protein, natural fats, and essential nutrients. So let's compare that to Oreos. So we've seen how it should work with a piece of protein and meat where your body's like, yes, I'm getting the nutrients I need from this. It's healthy. It tells my body, I'm done, stop eating it. Oreos are a highly processed food containing almost no protein, saturated with sugar and flavor-enhancing chemicals, and filled with added fats. As we eat the Oreos, generally at a much faster rate than prime rib, they move through us quickly and don't provide enough nutrition to induce satiation or satiety. So unlike the prime rib, there are no breaks to decrease our want of it. We want the 10th Oreo just as much as the first, and we never stop wanting more because even though we've eaten plenty of calories, our bodies know that we're still seriously lacking in nutrition. So eat the whole darn package because satiety can't be fooled. So your body's waiting to get some nutritional value out of it. And since it doesn't, you can keep going and going, and the body doesn't signal to yourself, hey, stop, we've got what we need from it. So in the case of Oreos, the only reason to stop eating is when our bellies are physically full. We realize we're about to make ourselves sick from overconsumption. There aren't breaks at all. That's just an emergency ejection seat. So clearly these foods violate our first good food standard by provoking an unhealthy psychological response. They're designed to do that. Chronic consumption of these foods don't just affect our taste buds, perceptions, and our waistlines. Over time, they literally rewire our brains. So let's talk about pleasure, reward, and emotion. They're all interconnected in our brain. Reward circuitry is integrated with the part of the brain that enriches a pleasurable experience with emotion, making it more powerful and easier to remember. So the combination of pleasure, reward, and emotion pushes you towards rewarding stimuli, which includes food. So the foods in question, supernormally stimulating without adequate nutrition, like Oreos, to invoke satiation or satiety, tell the brain to release dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with the pleasure center. So when you eat something, it can release dopamine. Pleasure. Dopamine motivates your behavior, reinforces food seeking or wanting, and energizes your feeding. It gives you that rush of anticipation before you've taken your first bite. You're daydreaming at work and start thinking about your favorite cookie from the downtown bakery. You're then visualizing the taste, the smell, the texture. You start to get excited and happy at the thought of picking up cookies all the way home. You want the cookies. That's your dopamine talking. So on the way home, you stop at the bakery, pick up a dozen cookies, and take your first bite before you've even pulled out of the parking lot. And of course, because the cookie is super normally stimulating, but lacking all nutritional value that satiate you and tell you to stop at one, immediately the brain releases opioids or endorphins, that the body is their own feel-good compound, which also has a rewarding effect. So the release of opioids bring pleasure and emotional relief, releases stress, and generally makes you feel good. This is why we associate, well, I feel better when I have some of these snacks or treats. And then the mind, it's like, you pick anything from chips to cookies to cake, you start thinking about it, and you want it, and that's all you think about. And before you know, you're standing in line buying 5 donuts. And I'm like, but I don't even want a donut, and I'm not hungry, but I'm here. And then we end up eating it, right? So over time, with continued reinforcement, those dopamine pathways begin to light up the mere suggestion of the food, like when you're driving past the bakery, see someone else eating a similar looking cookie, or watch a commercial for cookies on television. This preemptive dopamine response and the memory of the reward you'll experience when you indulge makes it all but impossible to resist the urge to satisfy that craving. Your want has turned into a need. So the kicker is you don't even have to be hungry, because it's not about satisfying your hunger, it's about satisfying the craving. And that's a big difference between actually hungry and craving. And if we satisfy all those craving, that's when we get all the extra calories, and we can increase our body fat, right? And so then it's, oh my gosh, it's a terrible cycle, because then we have guilt about eating it. We know we don't want to, and then we see the scale climbing, and it's just kind of this downward spiral. And so we can't just cut it off. We've got to rewire how we think, because we're so triggered by these things. So after your few trips to the bakery, your memory circuit tells you, reward circuits, that the cookie will bring you joy. Dopamine promises satisfaction if you only give in to your urge. You can't resist, so you eat the cookie or cookies, and your endorphins help you feel good for a while. And so the vicious cycle serves only to reinforce itself until you've developed a habitual response, the automatic craving for a specific food in response to certain triggers. So automatic cravings do not sound psychologically healthy to us. So let's talk about another thing. Let's talk about stress. Stress is another factor that promotes the reinforcement of these unhealthy patterns. We don't need a scientific study to tell us that many people eat when they're stressed to distract themselves from the situation and help themselves relax. The trouble is, chronic stress, whether it stems from anxiety or worry, lack of sleep, overexercise, or poor nutritional habits, is driving us via our biology to overeat. Stress affects the activation of reward pathways and impairs your attempts to control your eating habits. Did you know that? Stress makes it harder for us to resist our cravings. So when you're under stress, the urge to pleasure eat, which is eating for reward, is strong, and you're far more likely to overeat. Stress also causes you to change the type of food you eat, moving away from healthier choices towards, you guessed it, highly palatable foods that are sweet, salty, and high in fat. Who craves grilled chicken and broccoli when they are stressed? I've never done that. When you finally inevitably indulge, one thing is true: eating sugary, salty, fatty foods make you feel less stressed. This works via the same old mechanism we've been talking about, dopamine and opioid pathways in the brain. You experience stress, we eat the cookies, we really do feel better. This creates 2 problems, however. The first is that during stress, these strong opioid and dopamine responses in the reward center of your brain promote the encoding of habits. Future stress triggers you to remember the relief you experienced the last time you ate the cookies. Memories of those responses are stored in your brain, and you quickly establish a learned behavior, a want for more cookies, which means the next time you're stressed, you'll find yourself automatically reaching for the cookie. Also says stress eating can promote habit-driven overeating even in the absence of active stress. So as a result of the stress-related habits you've created, you may find yourself reaching for the cookie when you're feeling tired, cranky, or just kind of down. Because remember, cravings are strongly tied to emotions. Over time, as your brain continues to create new links between cookie and feeling better, the association and your wanting for more only continues to grow stronger. So the last nail in the stress coffin cookie is the stressed brain expresses both a strong drive to eat and an impaired capacity to inhibit eating. You may not even want to eat the cookie, but because your ability to not eat it is impaired, you sort of have to. You tell yourself you only have one, but under stress, you probably end up eating the whole bag, which in turn makes you feel stressed out. It's a vicious cycle. You probably didn't even realize you were stuck in it until now. So of course, we can't always eliminate stress in our lives. That half of the equation may unfortunately be here to stay. Our only recourse is to concentrate on the other half by eliminating the foods that play into this unhealthy stress response. Not coincidentally, they're the same highly processed, supernormally stimulating, non-nutritious foods that have been causing us trouble all along. So in conclusion, By now, you probably agree that the food you eat shouldn't mess with your head. You may even be a little bit mad at the way some of these things you've been eating have manipulated you into craving and over-consuming them. And we bet if we said, let's kick all the sneaky, tricky foods off our plates forever and eat only naturally delicious, nutritious, satiety-inducing foods, you'd probably throw up your hands and say, hurrah. But there's one problem with this plan. These unhealthy foods are really hard to give up. Really hard. Otherwise, we'd all be doing it. First, it's difficult to radically change your diet when you have so many powerful emotional associations with the food you're eating, especially if you're eating as a coping mechanism instead of from hunger, which most of us, it's a coping mechanism. Second, these foods are designed to hard to give up. Through the misuse of biological and natural cues, our modern technology has made these foods supernormally stimulating, rewiring the reward, emotion, and pleasure pathway in our brain to create an artificial demand for more. And when we tell you which foods are the worst offenders, which ones you'll be kicking to the curb, that's when the real trouble will start. I don't want you to panic. I don't want you to think, no way can I do this. You may ask yourself, I cannot live without this certain food. We assure you that you can and you will, and we're going to walk you through it. First, once again, we'll be able to appreciate the natural, delicious flavors that are found in whole foods, and they're going to pleasure and reward you experience when eating the delicious food will once again be closely tied with good nutrition, satiation, and satiety. You'll be able to stop eating because you're satisfied, not just because you're full. And lastly, you'll never again be controlled by your food. It's all about freedom. So this is what I love, because to me, it's so important to have a healthy relationship with food, a healthy mindset. Eat what you want to because you're in control of the amount you eat, how often you eat, and what you eat. But you can see because of the emotional, right, the hormonal response that comes, it is really, really hard. That is why you're not weak, you don't fail, you literally have to rewire the brain, and that takes time. So next we're going to talk about, the next chapter will be healthy hormones. As we put all these things together at the very end of the book, if you wish to do the challenge, right, we're going to pull some of those foods out, see how your body responds, get you into a healthy place, and then we'll slowly reintroduce them to see how your body does, which foods you want to keep out, and which foods you want to bring back. But hopefully this is helpful in helping you feel, move, and look better.